Okay, usually we have the series of the Tamei Mitzvot, the reasons, the logic behind the commandments. But today, because it's before Tisha B'Av, I decided to change the subject temporarily to a very important topic of Lashon Hara, Sinat Chinam, and Tzarut Ayin. There are three topics tonight, all in one. Lashon Hara, I think, is translated in English gossip or bad talking about people. Sinat Chinam is baseless hatred. Tzarut Ayin means a narrow eye, and they're all connected. The reason why it's important to speak about it tonight is because the rabbis tell us that every generation that the Bet HaMikdash is not erected, it's not rebuilt, it is as though that generation destroyed it. In other words, if it's not built now, it must be only because the same reason that brought about its destruction is still rampant, it's still going on, whatever that reason is, and we'll be discussing that tonight. So it's important for us to know what brought about the destruction of the second temple. Even though we know that both temples, both Bet HaMikdash, were destroyed on the very same day, Tisha B'Av, which makes this day even more serious. As all of you probably know, during the month of Av, many things happened to the Jewish people, many tragedies. Even the Holocaust began around this time of the year. So throughout the Jewish history, the Jewish people have suffered very much during the month of Av. But we're concentrating on the second temple because that's the most recent one. Rabbis tell us the second temple was destroyed for a very different reason than the first temple. The first temple was destroyed because of the three cardinal sins of idol worshipping, adultery, and murder. Right? They were very callous about these three sins. The second temple, however, these three did not exist so much. The biggest problem was Sinat Chinam. Sinat Chinam meaning baseless hatred. In order to describe to you what baseless hatred is, we have to use the example of the Gemara. The Gemara talks about the different reasons why the second temple was destroyed. There wasn't one, there were many. But as the saying goes, there's the straw that broke the camel's back. Or there is a more important reason, the one that stood out the most, the one that just this alone would have been sufficient to bring about the destruction. But there were other reasons. And the rabbis tell us as follows, that the Yerushalayim, meaning Eretz Israel, but it's the center of the Jewish people is Yerushalayim, Lo Harba was not destroyed only because Shedanu Din Torah. In other words, the Bet Din, the courts, they were judging people according to the Torah. What's wrong with that? Great. I wish they would do that today, right? That's what you might think. What's wrong with the Bet Din doing their job of judging people according to the Torah? But the rabbis explain as follows. When two, what should we call them, contenders, or two people come to court, Reuven and Shimon, it is the job of the Dayan, of the judge, to initially, before he hears the case, only before he hears the case, to suggest and to strongly recommend to make a peshara. Peshara meaning a compromise. That is the halakha. Even today, even if you're a solo, one judge, one rabbi, two people decided to take one, and not an odd number of 3 or 5, but take one because they both like him, they both rely on him, they both trust that his decision will be the right decision. He is supposed to, it's a mitzvah, to first encourage them to make a compromise. Without hearing what each one has to claim and each one has to say, are you both willing, before I hear your case, to make a compromise of some sort, come to terms? Otherwise, what is he going to have to do if the two don't want to compromise? He's going to have to go according to the halakha, according to what the Torah says. There are several problems with that. Problem number one, he might make a mistake if he does not know the halakha. Not everything is cut and dry, black and white. He has to look it up. There's volumes of books. They're very difficult situations to resolve sometimes. Whose fault it is, who's right and who's wrong, right? So that would be the number reason why it would be a good idea to always have a compromise. What would be another reason? This is a very important reason, is that just in case he did make a mistake and it's proven later, guess who has to pay? The judge himself, from his pocket. He made a mistake. In other words, it would be a wise thing to do, to make a compromise. But the third reason is the most important reason of all. And that is what the rabbis say, that Yerushalayim was not destroyed only because the rabbis, the judges, went according to the letter of the law. In other words, they judged people according to what the Torah says. But what they mean according to what the Torah says, they mean according to the letter of the law. This is what the law says, this is the din, this is the halakha. Reuven is right, Shimon is wrong. And again, what's wrong with that? Because the whole idea of resolving disputes is not necessarily determining who's right and who's wrong, but it's making peace. If you say, okay, Reuven is the one that's right, we've come to a decision, Shimon, you're wrong, forget it, that's it, Reuven is right. You know what's going to happen after they leave the court? Good chance that Shimon will start cursing the court, or the judges, or the rabbi. Shimon will not make up with Reuven, he won't want to look at him. They didn't make up, they didn't shake hands. One won and one lost. In reality, they both lost. Everybody lost. There's no such thing as winning. When you go to court, everybody loses. It's important to make a compromise because it's important that there should be peace amongst Jews. And therefore, when the rabbis tell us Yerushalayim was destroyed because the rabbis, the judges, went according to the letter of the law, they judged according to what the halakha is, according to what the books say, what it means is that they did not seek, they did not make an effort to make a compromise, to make peace between the two parties. And therefore, there was never peace between the two parties, between the multiple parties that ever came to court. And that is what breeds sinat chinam. Sinat chinam means one thinks he's right, the other one is wrong. It's not possible for everybody to be right. So one thinks he's right, the other one thinks he's wrong. And therefore, if there was no compromise, there was no peace, there was no relations, people didn't care about each other as much. They were indifferent. What does indifference mean? When one is in pain, you don't feel his pain. You don't care so much. That is sinat chinam. The danger of sinat chinam is that when you don't care for somebody, it's very easy for you to speak lashon hara, to speak bad about him, because you don't care. Remember, you're indifferent. You don't feel the other person's pain. If God forbid something happened to that individual, and you don't really feel it as though it happened to you, because so what? I mean, he's not your close relative. Then it will be easy, and you will be inclined to speak lashon hara, to speak bad about him, to gossip, or to do even worse things. But we're not going to talk about the worst things. We're just going to talk about what people think is maybe okay. Just talk. All I'm doing is talking. But that type of talking bad, comes from sinat chinam. But as we will soon see, there's something else to sinat chinam. Sinat chinam doesn't just come about. Let me tell you what happened. For those of you who recall, not too long ago we had Lag BaOmer, right? We had the whole Omer. You know what happened in the Omer? What tragedy happened during those days that we're somewhat mourning? We lost 24,000 Jews, the students of Rabbi Elyahu Kin. 24,000 great people, scholars. The rabbis tell us why did they die, all in a very short period of time. They did not respect each other. In other words, they were indifferent towards each other. They did not go out of their way to help each other. It's not that they actually caused harm and injury and did something terrible. They were simply not interested in each other. They were indifferent and therefore not respectful. Comes along Rabbi Akiva, who's their teacher, and apparently it must have been related to this event. And he tells us what has become a very, very famous saying. His saying, that very famous pasuk in the Torah, thou shalt love your friend as thyself. Ze klal gadol b'Torah, he says. That's a very important rule, a very important foundation in the Torah. So of course everybody is aware of this. It's a very familiar saying. Everybody realizes how significant it is that this mitzvah is the foundation in the Torah, because all the mitzvot depend on this. What does it mean to love your friend as yourself? It means that whatever you don't want him to do to you, don't do unto him. It doesn't actually mean love, to love, because that's not very much possible. To care for somebody as you care for yourself, yes. But love there's different kinds of love. Some are deeper than others. But to care, to be concerned for somebody else's property, for somebody else's well-being, as much as you care for yourself, that you can ask. And why is he saying this? As a result of what happened to his students, apparently. That tremendous tragedy obviously was a lesson. What was the lesson? They were studying Torah. They were so knowledgeable. They learned so much. They were great people. But despite the greatness, they were lacking in one very important area. They had this tremendous weakness. And that was when it came to ben adam lechavero, between man and man. As we've explained many times, the Torah has mitzvot, commandments, ben adam lamakom, between man and God. We put on tefillin every day, we keep Shabbat, right? But our neighbor doesn't care. He doesn't gain too much out of it if we keep Shabbat or if we put on tefillin. But there are mitzvot, mishpatim, ben adam lechavero, between man and man, which are important for society, for the well-being of the Jewish nation. And therefore, if I don't care, if I don't visit him when he's sick, if I don't do charity, if I'm not kind, then of course he suffers. He's losing something. So that's why this is what Rabbi Akiva's message is loving your friend, caring for him, engaging yourself in these mitzvot that affect mankind is a klal gadol. It's a very important foundation, because that's the foundation of the Torah. A great deal of the mitzvot in the Torah rely on this, right? If you will not care for your friend, you will come, God forbid, to cheat him, to take from him, and perhaps to commit other evils against him. And there's a list of things, a list of commandments in the Torah again that affect man and man. So therefore, this is a very important, a very strong foundation, and it's a foundation meaning that without it, you have nothing. You may have known, you may know, you may have studied everything by heart. You may know all the Torah, the halachot, the midrash, the zohar, the Kabbalah, everything that there is to know. But if you don't have human relations, if your ben adam lechavero is lacking, between man and man is weak, then you have nothing, because that is the klal gadol, that is an important foundation. Why is it so important? Not only because the tremendous amount of mitzvot rely on this and depend on this, but for another reason. There's a very interesting midrash. The midrash says that God says as follows: if the Jewish people would do the worst sin, what's the worst we can imagine? They would worship idols. God says, even if they would go down, stoop down so low, but they would be one unit, be'achdut, be'achva, as brothers and sisters, one family, I would not touch them. I would not punish them. I would postpone anything, right? I would not do anything against them. But if there is no achdut, if there is no unity, then they're very weak. In other words, anything can go against them. Any accusation against them, God forbid, can bring about a terrible decree. But idol worshiping, which is one of the worst things possible, which is a total denial, basically, basically, of Hashem. However, if they're one, if they're united, Hashem says, I'm not going to touch them. And we see this from the Dor HaFlaga. When they built the Dor HaFlaga, the generation that built the Tower of Babel, which was a rebellion against God, what happened to them? They were dispersed. The Mabul, that great flood that wiped away all of the human race at the time except for Noach and his family, right, was a lot more serious. Nobody remained alive except whoever was in the Teva. Why was this generation wiped away and the generation that built the Tower of Babel, which was rebellious, not wiped away? The rabbis tell us for that reason. The rebelliousness of the generation of the Aflaga, the Dor HaFlaga, was a very serious thing. Hashem tore down the Migdal, the tower, but because they were Safa Achat, they were one language, common language, they were together, united, Hashem said, I'm not going to destroy them, but He dispersed them. He mixed up their languages so they should not be united for an evil cause. But we see from that the same point, the point that Achdut, unity, is a very powerful tool. So the rabbis tell us in the Midrash, if the Jewish people would be united, nobody could beat them, nobody could defeat them. There would not be any accusation that would be able to succeed against them, even if there would be other problems with them, as long as they would be united. Imagine if we would be united, if there would not be 120 parties in the Knesset, but only one. You know what would happen? Mashiach would have been here already. But unfortunately, even amongst those who are religious, unfortunately, there's not enough unity. There is some, but not enough. Again, the languages that were formed at the time was to disperse these people who were united for an evil cause. So that was their punishment. People can now continue to be united amongst themselves despite the differences that exist. Which one of them is a language? Language is a barrier, but it does not stop people from still, caring for each other, right? I mean, we've had wars even amongst nations who spoke the same language, right? So that's not the main problem, not having a common language today. But that was the punishment of that generation. All right. Before we go to speaking about Lashon Hara in more detail, I just want to briefly touch on 3 ways to eliminate the Sinat Chinam. Later on, we'll talk about 5 ways to control Lashon Hara in our homes. But now, since we've spoken a little bit about Sinat Chinam, it's important to know how to deal with it. What are the causes for Sinat Chinam? Therefore, how do you deal with it? Basically, came up with 3. There might be more. The 3 that stand out are as follows. Kaas is one. One has to control his anger as much as possible, because anger leads to machloket. Machloket is arguments, fights, whether they're political or physical or whatever you want to call it. It comes from kaas. If a person would not have kaas, would not have anger in him, it would be usually not easily come to machloket. So in other words, the 2 are related, kaas and machloket. Kaas is a terrible thing to have, even though many of us have it in different degrees. We get angry from time to time. It's not something that you can eliminate if you have it, but it's something that you can control. Nobody's telling us to eliminate something, but to control it. We're human. Sometimes it's important to show anger, but there's a difference between showing it and having it. To your child, you want to show that you're very upset, but you don't want to be, deep down, you don't want to be angry at him. Your son, he's your child, your daughter. You love him or her. And you have to control yourself, because sometimes we had a very difficult day at work and we might be upset, and we're not really disciplining the child. We're just letting out our frustration on him. As I told you, perhaps, there was a rabbi who used to wait a half an hour after he heard from his wife what the child did, what the mischievous thing he did. He would wait a half an hour after he heard it and then go over to him and tell him off. He did not want to immediately after hearing it, which made him upset, to immediately vent his anger. He wanted to make sure that what he was saying was pure discipline, and that's why he would wait. So that would be number 1, is to control one's anger, to be in control. Second point is one of the most important points of all, and that will apply in Lashon Hara as well as Sinat Chinam, is to judge everybody positively. As we say in English, to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. My favorite example is when you see somebody going into McDonald's, with a kippah, of course, and you say, wow, some people might think, I guess he thinks nobody's looking at him or something. What should be the immediate reaction to judging positive? He's probably going to the restroom. Why think negatively when there's at least a 50-50 chance that he's doing something which is okay? There are many good things, or I shouldn't say good, but positive things that can be going on in that McDonald's. One of them is a restroom. And one of them, he just happened to be in the valley this week when it was very hot, and he needed a drink, right? I mean, what do you want him to do? It's okay. Now, sitting inside, taking a table for yourself, might be a little bit more of a problem, because, not everybody picks to see what you're eating. But we are told to be dan lechav zechut. He is told, the one who's going into McDonald's, not to attract attention, which brings about something called, in the halachic world, mar'it ayin. You have to be careful from mar'it ayin. Mar'it ayin means people seeing you, the eye observing observing you. If an eye is observing you, that eye might not have a chance to ask you questions. What did you do? And it might judge you, and it might learn from you the wrong things. So therefore, as an example, the rabbis tell us, if you're having dinner, you're having steak, and you're from Syria. In Syria, they have a drink called sharabeloz. Sharabeloz is the drink of an almond. They take almonds and they make a juice from it after they took off the peels, and it's white, looks like milk, and it's very tasty. And somebody might come to your house, either to drop off something, to say hello. He may be too shy to ask you, what's milk doing with steak? And he might just say, oh, this guy doesn't keep kosher or something. What do the rabbis tell us? That whenever you have this kind of a drink with meat, leave some almonds around the table, so that somebody should recognize that this is what it is. Now, what if you're at a wedding and you're having coffee and you're pouring some cream? Do we still have the problem of marit ayin, of an eye observing and being suspicious at a wedding when you're having coffee and cream? The answer is no. Why? Because everybody knows you're not having milk with your coffee. What's served these days at weddings and at banquets and at many events is cream with your coffee. And if this is a kosher supervised banquet, then they made sure that that cream is part of it too. So nobody's going to suspect, because everybody's known, it's an accepted fact that what you have with your coffee is mocha mix or whatever. Parve, of course. Okay? But when somebody does not know and he sees you doing something, there are many such halachot in the Shulchan Aruch. Be careful from marit ayin. There are certain things you cannot do. I'll give you another quick example. You cannot have a contractor build your home on Shabbat. You can't hire somebody to do work for you on Shabbat. Whatever you can't do, you can't have somebody do for you on Shabbat. Otherwise, what's the whole purpose? The whole idea of Shabbat is defeated. If you're supposed to rest, you can't give instructions for somebody else to do what you can't do. There are some exceptions. We won't get into that. But anyway, even though you awarded the contract to a contractor, and he can work on his own time, and some things would be permitted. If you give a suit, you give something to the cleaners on Wednesday, Thursday, and the guy wants to work on it on Shabbat, fine. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody cares. I mean, nobody can tell it's your suit. But everybody knows this is your house, and they're going to think you went to Pickle Boulevard and picked up some guys, right, and hired them to build this house for you on Shabbat. And that you can't do. Nobody will think, or they might not suspect, perhaps you awarded this guy a contract and you're not in town, and he's doing it on his time, and he happens to like coming on Saturdays. So because we live in a public place, and this is not somewhere in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where probably there's less Jews than here, right? But it's in a very strong Jewish community, and everybody knows this is Reuven or Shimon's home. This is marit ayin. People might think, and they're going to say, they may not ask, they may not verify, and because not everybody verifies, they judge, and they may judge wrongly, reach the wrong conclusions. This leads to problems. They're going to learn from you, they're going to learn the wrong halakha, they're going to judge you wrongly, and that's no good. So one has to be careful for himself to bring about any observation of him doing something that might lead to the wrong impression. But the individual who is observing is told something else. He's giving another set of instructions. He is told that when you see somebody and you suspect, give him the benefit of the doubt. But we can't expect that everybody will give us the benefit of the doubt, so we have to be careful with marit ayin. But if we are the ones doing the observing, then we have to be sure we give everybody the benefit of the doubt. 50-50 chance. And that, of course, we'll get into a little bit more deeply when we cover some real brief halachot about Lashon Hara, when you are allowed to say Lashon Hara and when not, when you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. So this is point number 2, very important. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I use another example. The example of if I can use a white piece of paper, but the idea is the same. I use a white piece of napkin, and I draw a little black dot on it, and I ask people to take a look at this paper. What do you see? And many people say they see a black dot. Why don't you tell me you see a beautiful white piece of paper? Why are you telling me you see a black dot? What about the rest? But people like to see what's negative. They like to concentrate and emphasize the negative and not look at all the positive that every human has. Okay? So it's important to be dan lechav zechut and to remember that there's a lot of good things about everybody. And if he or he has a weakness, we all do. Yes? You don't think it's negative, it's different? What do you mean something different? But I'm going to point out to you when they do. It doesn't mean they always look for the negative, but there are some situations where they do look for the negative, or at least they enjoy talking about the negative. Not necessarily they're looking for it, but if they happen to come across it, they heard about it, they enjoy talking about it. And when we talk about Lashon Hara, you will see how and why people do that. And number 3, the third point, which will help hopefully eliminate some sinat chinam, is doing charity. Torah is very strong on charity. Charity is, of course, a tremendous big mitzvah. It's a powerful mitzvah. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet, the rabbis tell tell us it has the power of sparing you from death, especially from a miserable death. Everybody dies eventually. So when it means, when they say tzedakah tatzil mimavet, that the charity has the power of saving your life, it means that if God forbid you were involved in an accident and that would have been a miserable death, the tzedakah that you did, the charity that you've given to others will save your life from that miserable death. And sometimes, of course, if death was coming early, tzedakah has the segula, the power to lengthen your life as well. Tzedakah, besides all of that, all the good things that it brings about, it also brings about peace amongst people. So being kind with others, giving charity, no matter who they are, whether you think he needs it or not, it trains you. It trains your mind. When the Torah tells us, "Patuach tiftach et yadecha," open, you should open. Why does it say it twice? Whenever you'll notice this, the Torah many times uses a double language, mot yumat, right, which is the death penalty. Many times it uses a double language. There's more emphasis whenever it's double. And when it comes to charity, patuach tiftach, the Torah wants us to know that charity is not a one-time deal. Okay, I'll do charity once a year. The rabbis tell us if you have a choice between giving $100 to one person or $1 to 100 people, give $1 to 100 people. Because patuach tiftach et yadecha, you want to get used to giving. You want to get used to opening your hand, something which is difficult for a human being to do. He's born, he comes into this world with his hands, with his fists closed. I want everything for myself, he says. But you know what happens when he goes? He goes with his hands like this, they're open. But when he comes, he wants everything for himself. And the Torah is training the Jew to become a giver instead of a taker. And tzedakah is not only something important and beautiful, it is meant also to train us to become givers, which is a beautiful thing. So not only are we assisting the poor, we're becoming givers and not takers. So patuach tiftach, continuously open up your hand. So this last item is very helpful in Sinat Chinam, because if you help every Jew, if you're interested in helping every Jew, that means you will care, which is the very opposite of being indifferent and not caring. There was a story during the 6-Day War, and I think it did happen in the Yom Kippur War as well. Many of the shuls in this country were collecting money for the front, for the Israeli army. Israel needed a lot of money. I'm sure many of you remember. And there was a speech made by the rabbi, this is during the 6-Day War effort, to raise funds, how important it is, how serious it is. And everybody, a lot of people contributed large sums of money. There was somebody sitting in the front listening to this whole speech who did not respond, did not participate. So somebody came over to him and asked him, why didn't you participate? Why didn't you donating? I'm not a member of this synagogue, he said. Terrible. What does it have to do with being a member of the synagogue, which was only an excuse, which of course was only an excuse for him not to give? Aren't you a member of the Jewish people? But there are some people who all they know is how to take and not how to give. It takes training. Again, it's not their fault. They're born like that, but we have mitzvot that if we do them correctly will get us out of it. And tzedakah is a very important one. Okay, before we get to the solutions for Lashon Hara, let me go over with you some of the halachot, some of the points about Lashon Hara, because what follows Sinat Chinam, one of the outcomes of Sinat Chinam is that one falls into the trap of Lashon Hara, to speak gossip about others. So before I begin with the list, let me just tell you what the rabbis tell us, and that is that Rov begezel, mi'ut be'arayot, be'akol be'avak Lashon Hara. If we took statistics, the rabbis say, of different sins to know how many people amongst the Jewish nation commit, the rabbis tell us that many people, the majority people, fall into the trap of gezel. Gezel means to steal. Now, it doesn't mean that the majority of Jews steal openly, take money from somebody's pocket or do something that is obviously stealing. Stealing could be, there's all forms of stealing. If you cheat somebody, right, there's all sorts of, we don't have the time to go into that right now, but the rabbis tell us, Rov begezel, a lot of people fall into this trap and say, it's okay. I'm going to take something from somebody without his permission. That's stealing, especially if you know that he may mind, right? So you have to be careful. There's a lot of halachot that go into what is considered stealing. So Rabbi tells the majority, a lot of people fall into the trap of gezel. Mi'ut be'arayot, the minority in arayot. Arayot is anything that has to do with immoral acts. Not everybody falls into this trap, even though we all have a yetzer hara, but not everybody falls into the trap. And number 3, kulam, and everybody falls into the trap of avak lashon hara. Avak means the dust of lashon hara, not real lashon hara, but the dust, meaning things that are similar, that come very close to lashon hara. So because it's something that everybody is almost involved and everybody can easily fall into this trap, it's an important topic. And as I said in the very beginning, because we're right around the corner from Tisha B'Av, it's important that we understand what lashon hara is and what is permissible and what's not. So let me take just a few moments in giving you some examples of what lashon hara is, what you may say and what you cannot say. The main rule of Lashon Hara is that we are not allowed to talk bignut. Bignut means in anything that is negative about somebody. If you're talking to your wife, you're talking to your husband, you're talking to your friend, and somehow you start talking about an individual. Lashon Hara means when you say something negative about that individual. Now, I didn't give you all the details yet. I just told you what Lashon Hara is. To speak negatively about an individual. That's what Lashon Hara is. Even if it's true, okay? Now, I emphasize that point. Even if it's true. Let's take an example. What would be Lashon Hara? You tell your wife, Yuda is very cruel to his wife. He doesn't let her go where she wants. Right? I don't know why he would tell his wife, maybe just to compare himself with whatever with it. That's Lashon Hara. That's a terrible Lashon Hara. Okay? But I'll tell you why I use this as an example soon, because there are some situations where it would be permissible. But you have to be very careful, so I'm going to give you some of the rules. Again, Lashon Hara, you're speaking negatively about whoever it might be. If it's not true, what you said, then it's even worse than Lashon Hara. It's called Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra means you're giving somebody a bad reputation. That's worse than Lashon Hara. It's untrue, unfounded. All right? Yeah? We're talking about Jewish people. The mitzvot that we have, the majority of the mitzvot, the commandments that we have, concerns the Jewish nation. However, if you want to be careful with Lashon Hara correctly, then you're not going to speak Lashon Hara about anyone, any individual. So yes, if you want to be careful, if you want to really control yourself and not speak Lashon Hara even about a tree, they say, as an example. In other words, be careful with it altogether. But we're talking about the Jewish people right now, not the prohibition. No, the prohibition does not apply. You can't steal from a non-Jew. Okay? There are certain things that apply to non-Jews as well. But the great deal of the mitzvot concerns the Jewish people as a family unit. Right? The tzedakah, the help that you have to give another Jew and so on. So that's number one. Number two, as we just said, was that if it's a lie, it's worse. How bad is this? The rabbis tell us it's so bad that there are 4 averot or so, of all the averot, 4 sins, that Hashem punishes the one who commits them in this world and in the world to come. The majority of the reward and punishment that one gets for his deeds is reserved for the world to come. It's not done here. Why? Because for one reason, it would interfere with her free will, with the bechirach of shit. So that is one reason why the great part of the reward and punishment that is waiting for us is reserved for the next world. This is a temporary world. This is a testing ground, a training ground, whatever you want to call it. It's a corridor, the rabbis say, right, where we dress up before we go into the palace, and therefore we're not paid for everything here. We paid for it later. There are 4 exceptions: Gilui arayot, avodah zara, shefichut damim, adultery, right, acts of immorality, murder, idol worshipping. Hashem punishes in this world, and Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, one may easily suffer as a result of speaking Lashon Hara in this world as well. He's going to suffer the consequences. So Lashon Hara is so terrible that it is compared to the 3 cardinal sins, that Hashem gives him something in this world to besides what is waiting for him in the next world. That's just as a side, so you should know how serious it is. What about if somebody is going to lose his job? The boss tells him, listen, I want you to tell me about this individual. I'm curious. I want to know what kind of individual it is. There's no significance in him telling him. It's just curiosity, plain gossip. And if you don't cooperate with me, if you don't tell me everything that I'd like to know, then I just won't hire you, or I'll fire you. One might think that because of his job, he should talk Lashon Hara. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to talk Lashon Hara, even though your job is at stake. Again, I did not give you details of what is permitted yet and what's not. I'm talking in general right now. Even if your job would be at stake, you would not be able to speak Lashon Hara. Another type of Lashon Hara is, let's say somebody asks you about somebody and you don't say words, but instead you make a face. That can easily be interpreted, right? And therefore that's a type of Lashon Hara. So whether it's in written form, or whether it's in orally, or whether it's with a facial expression, all of this is considered Lashon Hara. Yeah? Negatively, right? Right, that's a good question. We will see in a moment that a lot depends on your intention. And if what you're saying can be interpreted in 2 ways, as long as what you're saying can be interpreted in 2 ways, then it's not Lashon Hara. In other words, if your intention is not Lashon Hara, saying something negative, and what you're saying can be interpreted in 2 ways, then it's permissible. Because the other individual has an obligation too, as we will soon see, of not accepting Lashon Hara. Now we're talking about the one who's doing the talking, but there's another side to the coin, and that is the one who's doing the hearing. He can't accept, he can't listen to it. But if what you're saying can be interpreted in 2 ways, like the example you gave, right? He did not change. Something which is pretty neutral, that is not necessarily Lashon Hara. But a lot will depend on your intention, as we'll talk about in a moment. One who we're allowed to speak Lashon Hara about, who would that be? One that you are permitted, and sometimes it's a mitzvah to speak Lashon Hara about him, would be a wicked man. But what does wicked mean? Wicked means that everybody knows that he's wicked. Everybody knows that what he does is intentional. It's not just as a lack of ignorance. He couldn't care less. Some of the politicians in Israel would be real Rashaim. Their intent is to go against the Torah, to fight the Torah. They're apikorsim. They're in total denial of what the Torah says, and they don't care to change. It is okay, believe it or not, and they're from the very, very few, that it's okay and permissible and sometimes necessary, sometimes even necessary to speak bad about them, to tell people what these people are and what they say and what they have done. So that will be one of the very few exceptions. Only if you know for sure that he has committed a sin, that he's unrepentful, that he's a wicked man, and that he's simply an apikoris, a total denial. What if he just commits a sin? Then that's not a very easy situation, because even if a person commits a sin, maybe he repented, maybe he did teshuvah. The rabbis tell us, even if you see a big Talmid Chacham, scholar, committing an avera, a sin, don't suspect him, don't think bad about him, because perhaps the next morning he did already teshuvah. He already repented. So therefore, always give people the benefit of the doubt. As we said before, a 50-50 chance that even if he did commit a sin, that he is perhaps repented. However, if you see somebody committing it, and you know for sure he committed it, you're not in doubt, and you don't think he repented, then if you think that by telling his father or his rabbi or the Bet Din, there's a chance that they will let him know that what he did was wrong and that might influence him, then it's permitted to tell people about it, as long as you do it l'shem shamayim. Here's where their intentions comes in. If your intention is to help this person, that's your pure intention, to help, to let his father know this boy, this individual, or the student did something, that we have to let him know that it's wrong. So even though you're saying Lashon Hara, this will not be considered Lashon Hara, because why? Because your intention is l'shem shamayim, to help that individual, and you know that there's a chance that the person you're telling might help him. So that is a situation that what you're saying is permissible. What? No, if it's a total wicked person, as we said before, if a person is completely wicked, unrepented, and everybody knows about him, then it's not Lashon Hara at all. So even if you're making fun of him, you have no l'shem shamayim, you just want to point out to people, look at this guy, it's okay, it's not prohibited. In that case, your intention does not matter. Again, that was the only exception. If he's totally wicked, apikoras, denial of God, everybody knows about it, or somehow it's pretty public anyway, and he's unrepented, and nothing would come out if you spoke to him. He wouldn't repent. Such an individual will be an exception. Yes. I'm going to get to that. Now, so far we've spoken about how in the majority of cases you really have to watch yourself, weigh your words, watch your words, what you're saying, because it's very easy to speak negatively about somebody unless there's a real important reason, and we're getting to those exceptions. So besides the Rasha, we just said somebody who committed a sin, something terrible, wrong. If you know that the one you're going to tell might help, it might somehow save the situation, as long as your intention in telling him is Hashem Shamayim, is for the sake of God, for the sake of the mitzvah, for the sake of helping him, then that would be permissible. Let me just go on to the other few examples. What if your student or your son is befriending somebody, and you know that individual is not a good influence? So what are you doing? You're telling your son or your student or this individual, stay away from him. He's not a good influence for you. That is permissible. Because what are you doing? You're not necessarily speaking negative about somebody. Son who's befriending somebody who's a bad influence, if you have a student or even a friend, and you know that that other friend is not good, it's not good for him to be together with him, then it's permissible for you to tell him, listen, don't go to his house, don't be with him. It's not a good idea to go to his home and so forth. Because what are you doing? You're helping your friend, your son. Your intentions are good here. Your intentions are not to belittle or to accuse or to make fun of the other person. You have your own concerns. No, you're allowed to explain why. You don't have to. The rabbis tell us just be careful not to exaggerate, because what you're doing is just getting to the point. And if you start elaborating and exaggerating, then you might fall into the trap of saying extra things. But if you say, you know why I don't want you to go, this is the reason why, that will be okay. And that brings us to the subject of shidduchim, a very important subject that comes up all the time, and many people do not know how to deal with it. Let's say a father of a potential chatan wants to find out about a girl, or the other way around. His daughter who wants to find out about a chatan. He goes to the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, or he goes to somebody in the community, the Bet Yaakov. Tell me about this girl, tell me about this boy. What do you do if there's something negative that you know about the boy or girl? What would you say? This is for a shidduch. The girl, the girl that you're inquiring about, the boy you're inquiring about, there's something not right about it. First of all, you're allowed to ask. And second of all, is that person allowed to tell? It's Lashon Hara or it's not? It's not? Yes, no, who says yes, who says no? No, Lashon Hara? What? No, we're talking about somebody who's aware, who knows the family well, who knows the girl, the boy well. There's no more benefit of the doubt. You know the facts. Benefit of the doubt is a very true and important thing when there is a possibility for doubt. Here, there's no possibility to doubt. Okay? Anybody? Yeah. But Remez, he's a diplomat, so you should do it tactfully. Anybody? What? We're talking about it's relevant. They're not married yet. He wants to know if you should go out. If they should at all meet. Yes. Of course, we're not saying that he should lie. Chaz v'shalom, you're not allowed to lie. But he doesn't have to say it. Or does he have to say it? Or the question is he allowed to say it? Yes. If ask the person himself. Again, remember, Mr. Friedman. That's a common Jewish name, right? He's coming to ask about a boy or a girl. Are you telling me that he should ask the boy or the girl? Again, everybody is not some people are not interested that the other side should find out everything about them. Maybe they have an interest in this shidduch, and if they find out something, they might spoil the whole thing. So it's very important, of course, how you present the problem. Everybody agrees with that. Tact is always an important thing. But now we're dealing with not tact, we're dealing with lashon hara. Is it lashon hara? No. The answer is it's not lashon hara, on condition that this individual asking, tells the other individual why he is asking. I'm coming to you for this purpose. This is a shidduch, or I'm about to go into a partnership with Yaakov, and I know you know Yaakov. Tell me, can I trust him? Is he a good partner? And that individual that knows Yaakov to be a scum, he lost a lot of money, or whatever, he had problems with him. Not benefits of doubts anymore, true problems. Doesn't come to work on time, lazy. He's not going to make a good partner. Why should this one who's thinking of working with him or hiring him or whatever it might be have to suffer? So the other individual, what is he doing? He's doing a mitzvah. He's doing a good thing. He's helping. He's giving good advice. It is asked for. We're talking about asked for. Oh, you're talking about a situation where it was not asked for? Yes. That would be the same because that you're helping somebody get out of trouble. If you know for a fact, and it's not a situation like was mentioned before, that you could give the benefit of the doubt, because if you can give the benefit of the doubt, you have to. But if you know firsthand, not that you heard, the test for that, for your situation, will be whether you heard it or you know firsthand. If you heard it from someone, you're not allowed to tell this person, watch out, okay? You can tell them, be careful, look into it a little bit more. Unless you know firsthand information, you have to be careful what you tell other people. So if you know first-hand information that this is a very risky idea, of course you're allowed to tell them. Yes, right. That's a good question. If you heard it from a very, very reliable source, then it's like you heard it yourself. But the best thing to do would be to tell this individual, go speak to that individual so you hear it from him. Because we all know how it is different when you tell something second-hand information when you go to the actual source. So that would be the proper thing to do. Yeah, he should. Right. We said not only he can, but in reality, in some situations, he should, because he's helping the individual. As long as that individual makes it clear to him why he's asking him. Because if he doesn't make it clear, what's his business to know about somebody? It's lashon hara. Why should I tell you something negative about it? What do you need to know? He needs to clarify why he's asking him. Then you should not tell him. He's entitled, the one who's searching for the truth, he's entitled for the truth. And if you're holding that back, then you might be causing harm. You might be setting up a trap that individual will eventually regret. Imagine there's something terribly wrong. Imagine, not something small, terribly wrong. You know what that may cause? A divorce after Sheva Berachot. Chas v'shalom. There have been many cases, too many, unfortunately, where a couple has gotten divorced after a week, only a week. And I've heard one after a day too, right? It's best to know as much. We don't know everything before, but as much as we can, we should know before. And if therefore you know something that might help that individual, you have to tell. You should tell him. I mean, especially if it could make a big difference. So this is not a lashon hara, and it's important. All right, let me just go on because otherwise we'll be here too many hours. So this applies to a partnership as well. Another type of lashon hara is if somebody makes fun of somebody's character. Now he doesn't necessarily say something bad about what he did, but his character. This guy is a hot-headed person. That's lashon hara. Or if you speak about his business, he does crummy work. His furniture is not the best quality. Go shop at Western Avenue; they have better furniture. Or whatever. This furniture. This is all lashon hara, talking about him or about his objects that he sells, his business. Yes. If you're going to buy furniture, no, you're allowed to tell them. If it's something which is going to be a loss, then it's like the other way, like with the other example we gave. But you can't just make a blanket statement. You could say, if I were you, I would compare several stores. This store is a little more expensive, but it's more superior. Furniture, perhaps. You're not talking bad about this one. You're just explaining what this one is maybe a little bit better. You really have to be careful. Okay. Then there is a sort of prohibition against accepting lashon hara. If somebody told you lashon hara, you're the receiver. You have to be careful not to accept it, but to give the benefit of the doubt and do only one thing. If it's something really, really no good and it affects you, then you're allowed to suspect. You know the story of Gedalia ben Achikam? Gedalia, we have a fast of Gedalia, the third day of Tishrei. He was killed. The very few Jews that were left in Eretz Israel after the destruction of the temple, one of them was Gedalia ben Achikam, the leader of the remnant Jews, and he was killed. Somebody came to warn him that this Jew is about to kill you, and he didn't want to believe it. He was totally, what he should have done was to be suspicious. As a receiver, you're not allowed to receive Lashon Hara and accept Lashon Hara. But if it might affect you, the rabbis say you should at least suspect. You are allowed to suspect. Therefore, if you are told of a situation which might be somewhat dangerous or can cause financial loss, the rabbis allow us to suspect. And again, on the receiving end, we're not talking about the one who's doing the talking. Now, the receiving end, don't accept it. This guy is no good. You're going to see next deal, he's going to blow it for you. Don't accept it as being a fact that that guy is going to do something intentionally to hurt you, but take precautions. There's nothing wrong against taking precautions. Taking precautions doesn't mean you accepted it, this guy's a crook. But it's okay, because I was told to watch out that this guy does shady businesses, I'm going to be suspicious. So on the receiving end, you're allowed to be suspicious, but don't accept. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt, unless it's a fact. But even then, again, to be suspicious is the right thing to do. Watch yourself. Don't take chances. That applies even to astrologers. The rabbis tell us don't go seeking certain advice from astrologers, like what day should I go on this trip to Europe? You're not allowed to do that. That they should figure out for you what's the best time. But if they told you, don't go, it's very dangerous if you go on this day and this hour, then you would be a fool not to listen to them. It's okay and it's the right thing to be suspicious and to be cautious. But to initiate such a thing and to go to certain people, sorcerers and the types and the likes, and ask them certain things which are prohibited by the Torah, you're not allowed to. But if you have been told already, then don't go against it, because it might be true. So be suspicious, yeah? Ken? Yitzhak Rabin nirtzach milashon hara? Eze lashon hara? Okay, he's saying that Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated because of Lashon Hara. In other words, people said bad things about him. In that situation, אתה מבין אנגלית, במצב של יצחק רבין, לא צריך להגיד שזה היה לשון הרע, זה היה אווירה לא טובה. האווירה לא הייתה טובה. היו כל מיני השמצות, לא רק נגדו, נגד הממשלה כולה, ונגד המצב שאז היה בארץ. אבל מצד שני גם כן היה פחד לצד השני, מה שעלול לקרות. אז המצב היה חמור מאוד, מכל הבחינות, לא רק לשון הרע. זה היה מצב כמעט של מלחמת שאחד בעד ואחד נגד, והמצב פה זה לא סתם סיני, זה החצר שלי, זה הבית שלי שהוא הולך לתת לערבים. אז המצב היה הרבה יותר חמור ורציני ולא רק לשון הרע. אבל אני מסכים איתך שזה לא עזר, שדיברו עליו ודיברו על כל מה שהוא אמר והוא עשה ובוגד, דברים כאלה שהם נחשבים כהסתה, שהם מובילים לשנאה ולהתגרויות כאלה. אבל המצב היה הרבה יותר חמור מזה. אנשים ממש הרגישו שהוא ממש בוגד, שהוא ממש מוכר את המדינה. אבל מה באמת היה אצלו בראש, הכוונות שלו? אולי לא ידעו, אולי זה בכלל לא היה נכון, אולי בכלל הייתה לו כוונה טובה והוא סתם טעה בחישובים. אבל אנשים לא התחשבו בזה ולא שאלו אותו מה הכוונה שלך. הם הסתכלו על זה כמעשה בגידה, ולכן זה הביא למה שזה הביא. זה קצת שונה מלשון הרע, אבל זה דומה לזה. For those of you who didn't understand what I just said, briefly, in the situation, of course, with Rabin was not only Lashon Hara, it was a more difficult situation where people felt that they were betrayed. People felt in danger of losing their own backyards, not only the Sinai, but their own homes. They felt he was a traitor. Now, he may not have felt that he was a traitor. He may have had good intentions. He simply was making a mistake. But because this was a situation that was very close to a civil war, people acted or did things, including, as you know what happened, as a result of that hysteria, out of that panic, or out of concern for their own people, for themselves. So it was a lot more than just Lashon Hara. But he is right that Lashon Hara breeds hatred and can cause many, many serious situations like that. Okay, let's go on. Okay, the last item on Lashon Hara is the Isur of Rechilut, which is another avon, another sin in the Torah, which is to actually go out and spy. Rechilut means that you go and talk or tell your friend, you know what they've said about you? This is what somebody said about you. It's another form of Lashon Hara. You're not actually talking about somebody else, you're actually telling that individual what they said about him. So that's also not permitted. Unless, of course, there's some incredible reason of why he should need to know. Like, be careful. Okay, before we finish the first two parts, I want to go to the third part. This is a very, very important part of the lecture. And for those of you who were here when I spoke to the women for Rosh Chodesh Av, you may have heard some of these points. But for men, especially who are not here, I need to go over them. This is a very important part of the lecture. And that is, how do we deal with Lashon Hara? How do we remove it from our homes? It's not enough that we know how serious it is. It's not enough that we learn the halachot. It's not enough that we talk about it. We need to know how to control it. This is one of the most difficult mitzvot in our generation. That is why the Chafetz Chaim had to write a whole book about. People are very careless with it. So let me tell you what one can do, a little bit of what one can do at his home. And I put together 5. Point number 1. Many of you here are not old enough to remember Franklin Roosevelt. But Franklin Roosevelt sat together with Congress right after Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. And you know what he said? He declared war on Japan. Okay? What's the purpose of declaring war? Just go out. Send the Marines, send the Army. What's the idea of formally getting the Congress together, giving a whole speech on how we will defeat them and how they will go down in history as a day of infamy? What's the purpose of declaring war? Exactly, you're getting close. The point is the declaration of war is to tell the people to recognize the Japanese as an enemy. Declaring war means that we're going to be declaring war on this country, and we want all of you to know that they are the enemy. Remember that, because when you go to war, you must remember this is not a friend, this is an enemy. Makes a difference. Lashon hara has to be treated and considered an enemy of the Jewish people. Therefore, the first step is to declare war. If you declare war and you say to yourself and to your family, to your wife and to your kids, and I say this a lot to the women because unfortunately, many times, many women might get into the habit of discussing affairs about other people much more so than the men or the husbands. And therefore, they should take the lead in this, being careful to remember that this is an enemy. Enemy number 1. Once we remember to declare that Lashon hara as an enemy, it will help remind us that this is a sword. It's prohibited to talk about. So that's point number 1. Yeah. That's Lashon hara? No, that's a fact. Yeah. Yeah, no. Let me tell you something. It's not Lashon hara for the obvious reason that the rabbis tell us that men and women have their strengths and have their weaknesses. And this is one of the weaknesses that not all women have, but that many women have, in that they can easily get into a habit of talking more than they need to. Again, I'm not saying that this is bad. It could be good, but depending what the content of that conversation is. If you want to talk about yourself, about your house, about your children, that's okay. But the problem is that conversations lead to other conversations. That is why the rabbis told us to be careful not to overdo it, not to talk too much, because one thing can lead to another. And because women are more busy than men talking, this is what basically the facts show, they are more easily in this trap than the men are. In other words, they fall into this trap more easily. It's not that we're looking down or speaking bad about, negatively about women. It's just something that the women like to do, and it could be very enjoying, it could be very good and positive, but it could also be negative. It all depends, again, what you say. Men can also speak about bad things, about things that they shouldn't be talking about. They can also waste their time talking nonsense. But as a rule, the rabbis tell us, the woman is more susceptible that when she is talking, which she enjoys doing, she might be susceptible to talk about things that are not permissible as well. That's all. Yeah. Right. The habits, you're right, the habits of women have changed over the years because of the present situation. So the habits have changed, but there are certain things that have remained the same, that do not easily go away. But this is not something to be ashamed of, because that's the nature of the woman, who has many strengths as well. The man has other weaknesses that I haven't mentioned, right? It just happens to be that this one that we're talking about is something that the woman should take the lead. It's not that men do not speak Lashon hara. We all fall into this trap. But I'm saying the women should take the lead, because many times in the home, in a Shabbat table, where the children are gathered, the husband and wife are there, it is very possible for the woman to get involved with her children, to talk to her husband about the wedding they just attended, and did you see him, did you see her? Whereas the man would not care to talk about such issues. He would care about, let me see the report card. And where the mother would probably start talking about the teacher. Oh, I know that teacher. I know his wife and I know his grandmother too. I don't care about that. Why are you telling this to me? But that would be typically for a woman to say, oh, I remember the Shatchan also. I remember the one who made the shidduch between the teacher and his wife. Well, I didn't ask you that question. Why are you mentioning it? But that's typical. It really is typical, and it's okay as long as it's not Lashon hara. That's the only reason I say they're susceptible. That hasn't changed. So that's why I'm saying, because they're susceptible, they should take the lead. That's all I'm saying. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, in order to control Lashon hara, one has to look for the ma'alot, for the good things, the positive things that another individual has. Because we're susceptible to talk about the negative, if we start looking at the positive, you know what? He is like that and he's like that. I've used it myself a lot of times. When I saw somebody talking about something negative about somebody, I said, but you know, he's like this and he's like that too. He has this strength and he has that strength too. And that's somehow covered up, and we immediately changed subjects. So we need to stress that, to look for the positive that everybody has. Like we just talked about the weaknesses, and I started talking about the positive things. The women also have positive things. We all have something positive and something negative. Right. So you have, again, that's why the rabbis say don't overdo it. Anything, even positive, because you're right, positive leads to negative. So don't even overdo the positive. Number three is very significant. Be careful in your homes not to stir up any machloket or arguments on any Jewish group. A lot of people, even Orthodox people, in their home, they start talking about Lubavitch or Satmar or Mizrahi or some other group in the Jewish people, and that stirs up machloket. Don't talk bad about any group. No, I'm talking about Jewish group. The Reform are not Jews. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. They don't lead Jewish lives, but they are Jews. But they don't. So that's an exception. But anyway, I'm exaggerating a little. You see what that does? You have to be careful not to exaggerate. Number three is be careful not to stir up any machloket on any group. If you want to point out the weakness of a particular group, which is a fact, like you said, the Reform movement, that they don't follow the Torah, they don't believe in the Torah, that might be important, significant. So that would not be Lashon Hara. But be careful not to stir up any machloket. A child hears what his parents say, he's going to go tell his kids. He's going to pick on those kids in school who are different than him. That breeds machloket. Number 4, to do kindness with those who you dislike. The Torah tells us when you see your enemy's donkey having a hard time, help him out. Your enemy's donkey. And you know what language the Torah uses? Azov ta'azov imo. Azov means to let go. Why doesn't the Torah say help him? Ta'azor lo. It says azov ta'azov imo. You know why? Because when you do acts of kindness with those who you dislike, you're little by little letting go of that enmity, of that hatred that you have in you. You're helping somebody who you don't like. By helping him, you let go. Ta'azev, the sin'ah, the hatred that you may have with you. But kindness is very significant for another reason. Kindness is a challenge to see how unselfish we are, and it could be a lifesaver. And let me tell you a very, very incredible story that happened a few years ago in Bnei Brak. There's a poor family who always used to get 8 chickens a week from somebody who used to donate 8 chickens. And they came late one day. The woman was concerned. Finally, the chickens arrived on Friday, so she didn't have time to put them in the freezer. She already put them in the refrigerator. And it didn't take long for the neighbor upstairs to come down. He realized that he needs a chicken. He's missing a chicken, and he came to ask the neighbor to lend him, to give him a chicken. So the woman first hesitated. She only has 8. Does she need all 8? Can she give one? She says, you know what, let me ask my husband. She went to the husband to ask him, my neighbor asked for a chicken. Should I give him? He says, of course you should give him. She goes over to the refrigerator and opens the refrigerator. As soon as she opens up the refrigerator door, one of her children fell out, fainted on the floor, blew, apparently got stuck in the refrigerator. They rushed him to the hospital. As soon as he arrived in the hospital, the doctor says, had you been 1 minute late to open up the refrigerator door, you would have lost more than the chicken. You would have lost your child. So what happened over here? Hashem had sent down this neighbor test to see how selfish or unselfish these people are. Are they going to keep all 8 chickens for themselves or not? And apparently, and thank God they passed test, and had they been 1 minute late, had they hesitated too much, or had they refused altogether, they would have lost it. They would have lost a lot. Chesed is the ultimate test of how unselfish we are. So doing chesed with those who we dislike is the ultimate ideal mitzvah, because again, it helps to remove some of that hatred. And last but not least, number 5 is to ask ourselves every year. Tisha B'Av, as you know, is towards the end of the year. Another year has gone by. Why hasn't Mashiach come? A lot of people look forward to a certain piece of mail, whether it's their income tax refund, whether it's a rebate. Why hasn't it come yet? And when it doesn't come, we call up the company. Is it in the mail already? Is the check in the mail? We're very anxious. How many of you here have been so anxious for Mashiach to come? As much as we were anxious sometimes for a mail to come. And when he hasn't come, another year has gone by and he hasn't come, do we ask ourselves, why hasn't he come? But we should ask ourselves. Tisha B'Av is a very good time to do something very special. And that is, you know how we sometimes open up an album at home? The album has beautiful pictures, memories of the children when they were babies, those smiles and all those adventures. Tisha B'Av is a very important day. It's a special day to open up a different kind of album. An album of all Jewish tragedies, whether it was the Inquisition, the pogroms in 1648 and 1649, First and Second Temple destruction, the Crusades, the Holocaust. It's a time to open up that album of all the tragedies, because by opening up that album, we're opening up our heart, which is not open right now. If it would be open, we would care about other Jews. We wouldn't speak Lashon Hara about them. We wouldn't be indifferent. We would be kind to them. The only way we can open up that heart is if we open up that album and see what has that closed heart, that indifference caused. It has brought about all these tragedies. That is, again, I think that one of the things we need to do on Tisha B'Av in order to achieve that. We need to ask ourselves what has happened. What has happened that Mashiach hasn't come yet? So all of these reasons that I gave you, these 5 methods, help. They only help in controlling and eliminating Lashon Hara from one's home. But it has to be a sustained effort. It can't be one day yes, one day not. If we continuously maintain the effort of fighting this, then it will be our generation, B'ezrat Hashem, that will have the merit of rebuilding that Bet HaMikdash, B'ezrat Hashem. I mean, okay, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I have a lot more to say, but I want to hear, if you have any questions, I'll take it. Yes. If you don't specify the person, you're just sharing an experience, right? Then you haven't said Lashon Hara about a particular individual, right? Right. You haven't given a name. Yeah, but you should be careful. I mean, if that person knows who that person might be, then yes, then there will be Lashon Hara, even if you didn't say the name. If that person has no idea, yeah, right. But you should still be very, very careful, because again, that leads to Lashon Hara. You're not going to say the name. Next time you are going to say the name. Well, that's the difference. With help situations, as long as your intentions are L'Shem Shamayim, you're trying to help somebody, you're trying to point out a problem that he has, that somebody's abusing you or something, yes, that's important, sure. That's different, that you need that help. As long as it's L'Shem Shamayim, it's pure intention, and you know that for a fact, that your intent is not to belittle him, speak bad about him, but to help, like with Shidduch, that's okay. Just a minute, yeah, right. That was going to be my next couple of points, is to talk about narrow eyes. If you have 5 more minutes, I'll talk about that. Yeah, okay, yeah, right. Well, you can tell him if she or he is about Teshuvah. You don't have to talk about the past. Yeah, reading the secular newspaper, right? That's all it is. Secular is all gossip, right? The Goyim, they thrive on gossip, right? It's full of it. Yeah, avoid it. Yeah. Number 5 is on Tisha B'Av, asking yourself, why hasn't Mashiach come? Why has it been so many years that the temple is still not rebuilt? What is it that brought about the disorder? In other words, when you think about these things, you become more sensitive to other Jews who maybe you didn't care for in the past, but you realize that because of that lack of unity, it's not helping to bring Mashiach. Yeah. No, but you can't declare war on the Yetzer Hara so easily, because there's a lot of things that we have that we need. We have sometimes certain desires. Those desires can be good and bad depending on how you use it. So you can't declare war on the Yetzer Hara on something specifically that might have you may have some need for it. Lashon Hara, there's no need for it. So we're declaring war on this as first of all, it's enemy number 1, because of it we haven't seen the Bet HaMikdash, Mashiach, and we have to recognize this as an enemy. We can't just say, oh, it's not the right thing to do. It's not nice. No, it's a lot worse than that. It's just like Gilui Araya Avodah Zarah Shfichut Damim. En lo chelek l'olam haba, the rabbi tells. He will not have a share to the world to come unless he does teshuvah. A terrible sin. We have to recognize it as an enemy, and we have to point out to the children when they start saying Asur, Lashon Hara. In other words, we have to recognize it as an enemy, not just don't talk Lashon Hara, some people say. No, it's a lot worse than that. But anyway, yeah, to who? Yes, you're not allowed to talk bad about the dead either. There's a halakha. You have to ask forgiveness. He spoke bad about, even if it's factual. Yes. Right, they cannot be there to defend it. That's correct. Right. Sarut Ain, with Sarut Ain, it's like this. What's Sarut Ain? Narrowing of the eye. The rabbis tell us that one of the worst things to have is a narrow eye. One of the best things to have is an Ain Tova. Ain Tova is a good eye. Ain Ra'ah is a bad eye. But to distinguish an evil eye, which people are afraid of, from Sarut Ain, I call one Sarut Ain, the other one Ain Tova. A good eye is a positive eye. Gives everybody the benefit of the doubt, looks at everything positively, is optimistic, is always happy, and so forth. A narrow eye is as follows. There are people who are jealous. What's jealousy? Jealousy means I'd like to have what he has. What can we do? People are jealous. You need to control it. You shouldn't desire what your neighbor has, and so forth. You know what narrow eye is? You can't take it that the other one has it. It's not so much that you would want it yourself. You would rather that he not have it either. It bothers you that the other person is successful, that he's happy. Not that you would like to be like him. You're okay too. But it bothers you that he has something. That's called narrow eye. A narrow eye means that your focus is very narrow and you only focus on the negative. And because you're focusing on the negative, on the bad, that easily leads you to speak Lashon Hara. So in reality, the source or the root of Lashon Hara, the very, very root, is a person having a very, very narrow eye or a narrow scope. You know how the saying goes? He can't see the forest for the trees. Narrow scope. Look at the whole picture. And that brings us to the point we said before. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. People are afraid when they see somebody better than them or just as good. Oh, he might be superior. No, he's in some ways superior to you, and in some ways you are. We're all special in some way. Hashem put us all here. We're all in the image of God, Jew or non-Jew. So don't be afraid or jealous or look narrowly at somebody, because what you think he has that's so special and so nice, you have something that he doesn't have. We all contribute. You have something that you're contributing that he doesn't have, that he's not capable of doing, and he has that something. That's what we're all here. We need each other. Husband and wife need each other. Each one complements and fills in where the other one is lacking. So Tzarut Ayin cannot see the whole picture. He only sees that little and focuses on the negative. And because he chooses to focus on the negative, he speaks Lashon Hara. Why does he choose to focus on the negative? Because that's the only way he can feel comfortable. It makes him happy. Oh, you see, he's also bad. He also is weak. He cannot tolerate seeing the good of of the other. But it's important, as we said, method number two is to look at the whole picture. Everybody has something good at them. So when you have this problem, immediately look away from the negative and start looking at all those beautiful traits that he or she might have. This is important in marriages too, husband and wife. She's like this, she does this. What about all the good things? Is she a good mother? Does she cook good? Does she do this? Fine. I don't want to talk about marriage right now because it's a whole different subject, but the rabbis tell us a great deal about some of the marriage problems where people focus very narrowly and they forget that if the woman, all she does great is raise the kids, she does a superb job in that, then for that alone it's worth it. And people forget that. No, she just doesn't know how to make cholent. She just can't do it. So what? What about everything else? Or he just comes home so late and never talks to me. Typical complaint. Never says anything, right? Never home. But what about everything else? Does he take care of the children? Does he do this? Does he do that? Does he provide for this? Yes, but people somehow focus on the very negative, on that which disturbs them, instead of concentrating on all the beautiful. We all have something negative and something positive. If we wouldn't have anything negative, we wouldn't be here. We would be like the malachim. But what life is all about is hashlama. Hashlama means to perfect ourselves. And the Jewish people, of course, have a big job ahead of them, is to perfect themselves as a nation. And of course, we haven't been doing a very, very good job, but we've done a little bit, and that is evident in the massive wave of teshuvah that we have today, that many people have been deprived of their Jewish heritage, but they're coming back, they're thirsty, and that is proof that they see the truth and they're not ashamed of it. For some of them, it's very difficult because of peer pressure. What will he say? What is my neighbor going to say when she sees me covering my head? What are you concerned about? What your neighbor will say or what he will say? So it's a matter of being strong, of being able to overcome that pressure. But the other people, that neighbor, that observer, has another job, and that's to be very, very careful not to throw cold water on people, not to speak bad about them, because they're preventing somebody from doing teshuvah. So again, it's a two-way street. It's important for the speaker and for the receiver to be careful. The speaker has to be very careful on how he chooses his words. The receiver has to also be careful on not to believe everything, because if you cooperate and believe, then you're strengthening the lashon hara. You're adding fuel to the fire, and then you're going to tell somebody else, oh, he tells me this and he told me this, and that's how rumors spread. The Torah is against the spread of rumors, even if they're true, because all they do is cause machloket and a lack of unity, which is very important for the Jewish people. The strength of the Jewish people is achdut, and that's the only thing that has the power to bring the Mashiach to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. Sarut ayin, therefore, that narrowness of the eye is something that, again, not everybody has, as much as, everybody has it in different degrees, but deep down, everybody has a little bit of that kin'ah, of that jealousy. And some of it is okay, it's positive to be jealous of somebody who's doing very well, to want to be like him if it's good things, but not to be jealous of somebody who is successful in something which is not so Jewish. So that jealousness is good. So some of what we have to direct it correctly, positively. The only one thing that we have to totally eliminate, or at least control, is lashon hara, which basically has no value whatsoever. Again, except for the few exceptions that we gave, that you really have to use your judgment, you really have to mean Lashem Shamayim and have good intentions. Otherwise, we have to be very careful. Nothing good comes out of it. And therefore, the rabbis tell us, Siag la chokhmah shtika. A gate surrounding chokhmah, protecting the chokhmah, the intelligence, is shtika, is silence. What do they say? Speech is silver and silence is golden? Something like that. Silence is silence is golden. It's even more important than speech. You know why? Because when a fool starts talking, you can tell he's a fool. But as long as he doesn't talk, you might think that he has a lot of intelligence. The silence is golden. And at home, especially, that the children hear what parents talk is extremely important. But even if not at home, you're talking one-on-one between the two of you and nobody else is listening. Hashem is still listening. It's still not the right thing. Even though that individual may never know that you spoke about him, it's still wrong, because it's leaving you a flavor, a taste of enmity against somebody. And Jewish people are supposed to care for each other. Lashon hara is therefore a weapon, a terrible weapon against that. In other words, if you want to work on making bridges, on building unity, then that is enemy number one that has to be controlled, has to be gotten rid of. And that's the only thing that's holding back the Geulah. We are told if we would fix this, the Mashiach would come tomorrow. This is what brought about the destruction, the sinat chinam lashon hara. And the only way we can fix it is what the rabbis call ahavat chinam. Ahavat chinam is just the opposite of sinat chinam. Baseless hatred, baseless love. I love him for only one reason: he's Jewish, and that's enough reason to care for another Jew. Yes. We have 2 ears. Yeah, imagine if we had 2 mouths. Thank God we only have 1. Huh? But even so, the rabbis tell us that's why Hashem put controls. He put the teeth and the tongue, all these barriers. Because once, as long as the word is still in your mouth, you're in control of it. Once the word leaves your mouth, it controls you. You can't take it back. So the speech that the human being has, which the animal doesn't, is a very powerful tool. Speech. It could be used for good things, and it could be used for bad things too. But it's of course up to us. We have the free will on how we manage it and how we use it. Yeah. Again, it all depends how you go about it. If you use tact and diplomacy and you basically say, this job is better performed by this individual. He's better suited for this. You have to be very tactful. I mean, give you an example, teachers. There are teachers in schools who are better with small children and some that do very well with older kids. What's the difference between the two teachers? For small children, you need a lot more patience than for older children. You also need creativity, ingenuity, right? You agree with me, right? It's simple, it makes sense. So what are you going to tell them? You're no good? All you need to say is, listen, you are an excellent teacher for grade 8 and 9. Instead of saying you're no good for grade 2 and 3.